Brayden Ellis hadn't meant to cry, especially not in front of his daughter, but there he was, shoulders hunched, fists clenched, sitting on a cold park bench as the late afternoon sun bathed the empty playground in gold. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" asked little Mia, her soft voice tugging at his heart. He blinked hard and looked down at her, 5 years old, hair in 2 messy braids, her shoes scuffed from the hand-me-downs they were. He forced a smile. "Not today, bug. We've got spaghetti waiting at home." Her face fell, but she nodded and ran back toward the slide, pretending not to be disappointed. Brayden leaned forward, elbows on his knees. One more job rejection today. His bank account was at $32. Rent was due in 5 days. Life had been in freefall since Mia's mom left 2 years ago, and he was running out of parachute. "Is she yours?" The voice came from his left, soft but confident. He turned to see a woman sitting at the far end of the bench. She wore jeans, a simple white tee, and sunglasses pushed up to hold her thick, dark hair off her face. Her sandals looked like they cost more than his entire wardrobe. "Yeah," he said, "that's Mia. She's adorable," the woman said, watching Mia run. "I saw her sharing her crackers with a squirrel earlier. Very generous." Brayden let out a breath of a laugh. "She always shares, even when we don't have much to give." The woman looked at him for a beat, then back at the playground. "I'm Sienna Whitmore," he hesitated. "Brayden." "Brayden Ellis." She extended her hand, and he shook it. Her grip was warm, firm. She didn't look like she belonged in the neighborhood, definitely not the kind of woman who usually sat alone in a park on a Thursday afternoon in a part of the city tourists didn't go near. "You from around here?" he asked. She smiled just a little. "Not exactly. I'm staying nearby for a few weeks. Needed a break," he nodded. "Well, hope you're enjoying the local charm." She glanced over at Mia again. "You come here often?" "Every day," he said. "Free entertainment." "And she loves it." Sienna watched him for a moment. "How old is she?" 5, going on 15. "Single dad." "Yeah." A pause. "Her mom left when Mia was 3. Haven't seen her since." There was a silence between them that didn't feel awkward. The late sun threw long shadows and the breeze rustled the trees behind them. "I'm sorry," she said genuinely. "Life goes on," he replied, not bitterly, just tired. "You got kids?" Sienna shook her head. "No, never really found the right time." "Or the right guy." "Yeah," Brayden said. "I guess timing's everything." They sat like that, quiet, peaceful for a few minutes. Mia ran up to them, cheeks flushed. "Daddy, can I play 5 more minutes?" He glanced at the sky. "Sure, bug, 5 more. Mia turned to Sienna. "You want to come push me on the swing?" Sienna blinked, almost surprised. "I'd love to." Brayden opened his mouth to object. He didn't know this woman, but something in Mia's face, in Sienna's gentle smile, made him hold back. He watched as Sienna walked hand in hand with Mia to the swings, pushing her gently, laughing when Mia squealed with joy. Something tightened in his chest. She didn't know him, but she got down on Mia's level. She listened. She cared, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. When they returned, Mia was still giggling. "She pushes better than you, Daddy," Brayden grinned. "I believe it." Sienna checked her watch. "I should get going." He nodded and stood. "Thanks for being kind." "She doesn't get a lot of that from strangers." "I like her," Sienna said, then looked at him. "And you seem like someone who's doing his best." He shoved his hands into his pockets. "Doesn't always feel like it's enough." Sienna hesitated, then pulled something from her bag, a business card. "I'm not giving this to you for a job," she said quickly. I'd like to see you two again. Maybe tomorrow." He looked down at the card, just her name and a number. "I don't usually." He started. "Me neither," she said. He nodded once. "Okay. Tomorrow." She gave him a smile that stuck in his mind long after she walked away. That night, as he tucked Mia in, she whispered sleepily, "I like her, Daddy." "Yeah," he said softly, brushing hair from her forehead. "Me too." He didn't know who Sienna really was. He didn't know that she owned a tech consulting firm worth millions, or that she had walked out of a boardroom that morning to sit on that park bench. He didn't know that she'd felt lonelier in her penthouse than she ever had in her life, and that something about him, about the way he looked at his daughter, like she was his entire world, had cracked something open inside her. All Brayden knew was, for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to tomorrow. Brayden arrived at the park the next afternoon with Mia skipping beside him, her tiny hand wrapped around his. There was something different in the air warmer, maybe. Or maybe it was the way Mia kept glancing up at him with barely contained excitement, as if she knew something special might happen. He hadn't expected Sienna to show up again. People like her didn't usually follow through. But there she was, already seated on the same bench, a takeaway coffee cup in hand, her sandals dusted from the dirt path. She looked up when she saw them, and her face lit up not in the usual polite way people smiled, but like she was genuinely glad to see them. Mia let go of his hand and ran toward her. "You came back," she said, climbing up onto the bench beside Sienna without hesitation. "I said I would, didn't I?" Sienna replied, setting her coffee aside. "I brought something for you." She opened her canvas tote and pulled out a small book, its cover colorful and worn in a way that said it had been loved before. "I used to read this when I was your age. I thought you might like it." Mia took the book reverently. "Thank you," she whispered, already flipping through the pages. Brayden sat down on the other end of the bench, watching the interaction. "That was really kind," he said quietly. "I remembered what she said about loving stories," Sienna replied. "And I figured, why not pass one along?" Brayden studied her. She wasn't wearing makeup today, and her hair was pulled back into a loose bun. She looked more relaxed than the day before, though there was still something guarded in her posture. "You don't seem like someone who reads alone in parks," he said. "I don't," she admitted. "I've been trying to figure out how to slow down, but it's harder than I expected." He nodded. "You running from something?" She turned to look at him, eyes sharp but not unfriendly. "Maybe. Or running toward something. I haven't decided yet." Mia was now seated cross-legged on the grass just in front of them, completely absorbed in the book. "I used to think life would make more sense by now," Brayden said. "But here I am, 33, still trying to keep my head above water." Sienna tilted her head. "Can I ask what you used to do before everything?" He hesitated. "Logistics, warehouse coordination, I was good at it. But the company downsized last year, and I haven't been able to land anything steady since." She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "I've applied to places I never thought I would," he continued. "Security gigs, kitchen work, even overnight shifts at gas stations. No one wants to hire someone with a 5-year-old and no flexibility." "You ever think about starting your own thing?" she asked. He huffed a laugh. "With what money? I barely have enough to keep the lights on." Her gaze lingered on his face. "Not every investment is financial. Sometimes it starts with an idea. You sound like someone who gives TED talks." "I've been to a few," she said with a shrug. He narrowed his eyes at her. "What exactly do you do, Sienna?" She paused, then said, "I consult, mostly tech development. I help companies figure out what's broken before it costs them everything." He let that sink in. "So you're the person they call when the ship's already sinking?" "Sometimes, but I prefer to get there before the leaks start." Mia held up the book. "Can you read a page with me?" Sienna smiled and slid down onto the grass beside her. Brayden stayed on the bench, watching them. It was strange watching someone so polished, so clearly out of place in this part of town, read a children's book aloud in the grass like it was the most natural thing in the world. After a few minutes, Sienna looked up. "You mind if I steal you for a walk, just around the park?" "I need to stretch my legs." Brayden looked at Mia. "You okay here? I got my book," she said without looking up. "Go." They walked along the gravel path in silence at first. The trees rustled overhead, and somewhere nearby a dog barked. "I didn't mean to pry," she said eventually. "About your job or your life, it's fine," he said. "People don't usually ask." "Well, I'm not most people." "I'm starting to get that." She stopped walking and turned to him. "You're carrying a lot," he shrugged. "That's what dads do." "You ever let someone carry some of it with you?" He shook his head. "Not really an option." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her bag again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This isn't a handout," she said. "It's a possibility. I know someone who's hiring. It's warehouse work, but it's steady, and the manager owes me a favor." Brayden stared at the paper. "Why would you do that?" "Because I see something in you," she said. "And because your daughter deserves to see what happens when someone believes in her dad." He took the paper slowly, folding it without looking at it. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just think about it." They returned to the bench and found Mia carefully tucking the book into her backpack. Sienna crouched beside her. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Mia hugged her without hesitation. Sienna's arms wrapped around her a little tighter than Brayden expected. As they walked home later, Mia chatted about the story, the characters, and how she wanted to write her own book one day. Brayden didn't say much. His mind was full. Of the job lead. Of the way Sienna had looked at him. Of the fact that someone like her had seen him, really seen him, when no one else had in a long time. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was failing. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was beginning again. The warehouse smelled like metal and dust, but for Brayden, it might as well have been a palace. He adjusted the strap of his work gloves and glanced around at the organized chaos: forklifts humming down aisles, pallets stacked high, and men calling out to each other over the hum of machinery. It had taken one phone call, a short interview, and a reference dropped with the name Whitmore, and suddenly he had a job. He hadn't told Sienna he'd taken it, not yet. He wanted to stand on his own feet first before she saw him in this space, sweating through his uniform shirt, hands rough from lifting crates, finally earning enough to stop the bleeding. By the end of the first week, he'd caught up on the overdue electricity bill and filled the fridge with more than boxed pasta and frozen peas. Mia had squealed when she saw the strawberries. On Saturday, he brought her back to the park, same time, same bench. Sienna wasn't there. He told himself not to expect anything. She hadn't made promises. But by the time they were packing up to leave, Mia tugged his sleeve and asked, "Is she okay?" He crouched beside her. "I don't know, Bug. Maybe she had something important come up." Mia nodded, but her brows stayed furrowed. They went home, and the weekend passed without a sign of her. But on Monday afternoon, as he clocked out and walked toward the bus stop, he saw her leaning against a black sedan parked at the curb, arms crossed, sunglasses shielding her eyes from the late sun. "You missed your usual bench," she said when he approached. "I was working," he replied, surprised she had tracked him down. "You didn't have to come here." "I wanted to see if you took the job." He raised a brow. "And if I hadn't, I would have asked why and listened." She paused. "But I'm glad you did." He glanced back at the warehouse. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." "You look different," she said, her eyes studying him. "Straighter, like you're standing taller," he chuckled. "You always talk like that, only when I mean it." He looked down at the pavement. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." "I wasn't sure you'd want to," she answered. That made him lift his gaze. "Why would you think that?" She pulled off her sunglasses. "Because I've spent years in rooms where every conversation came with strings attached." "You don't ask for anything." He saw something raw behind her words, not vulnerability exactly, but weariness, like she was used to being admired, not understood. "I don't need anything from you, Sienna," he said quietly. "You already gave me something I hadn't had in a long time, someone who believed I could do more." She looked down at her hands. "That's not all I want to give," he blinked. "What does that mean?" She hesitated, then reached into her bag and held out a square envelope, black with gold trim. "I'm hosting a benefit gala this Friday. It's for Youth Technology Access Program STEM labs in underserved communities. I've been on the board for years." He took the envelope carefully. "You want me to come? I want you and Mia there." He stared at her. "It's black tie," she added. "And don't look at me like that. I'll handle the wardrobe." "That's not," he stopped. "That's not my world, I know," she said, "but maybe it doesn't have to stay that way." He exhaled slowly. "I don't have anyone to watch Mia that night," she straightened. "Bring her. There'll be other kids there, and I want her to see what her dad looks like when he's standing among people who couldn't hold a candle to him." He was quiet for a long moment. "All right," he said finally. "We'll come." Her smile was the real kind, not polished or practiced, just warm. "I'll send a car," he shook his head. "We'll take the bus." She tilted her head. "You're stubborn." "Only when I need to be." She stepped closer. "You don't need to prove anything to me. I'm not trying to. I just want to walk into that room knowing I got there with my own steps." Her eyes softened. "Then I'll meet you at the door." The next few days passed in a blur. Brayden worked double shifts to make sure he could afford the rest of the month's bills. He borrowed a suit from his neighbor, had it tailored for $10 by a woman who lived 2 floors down, and polished his shoes until they shone. For Mia, He found a second-hand boutique uptown that offered gently worn girls' dresses. He picked one in soft blue with tiny silver stars stitched along the hem. She beamed when she saw it. On Friday night, they arrived at the venue, a glass-paneled ballroom perched above the river, lights glowing like a constellation inside. As they stepped into the lobby, a woman in a headset approached. "You must be Mr. Ellis. Miss Whitmore asked me to escort you inside." Mia clutched his hand tightly, eyes wide. He bent down. "You ready, Bug?" She nodded solemnly. "I feel like a princess," he smiled. "Then let's go meet the queen." The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers floated above, and a live string quartet played near the stage. Waiters moved gracefully between guests carrying silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. It was a sea of tuxedos and silk gowns, laughter and champagne flutes. Brayden felt out of place the moment they crossed the threshold. But then he saw her. Sienna stood near the center of the room, speaking with a group of investors. Her dress was midnight blue, sleek and simple, her hair pinned back to reveal diamond earrings that probably cost more than his car. But it wasn't the dress or the jewels that hit him. It was the way her face lit up when she saw him. She excused herself and crossed the room in a few elegant strides. "You clean up well," she said, her eyes flicking over him. "You look like the future," he replied. She leaned down and smiled at Mia. "You look like the star of the night." Mia curtsied, and Sienna laughed. Brayden watched them together and realized something he hadn't dared admit. He wanted more than a thank you, more than a park bench conversation. He wanted a life that included her. But that kind of life came with risks, and he wasn't sure if his heart, already bruised and calloused, could take one more leap. Sienna reached out and took his hand. "Walk with me," she asked. He nodded. And they stepped into the crowd together, two people from different worlds, both daring to believe they might just belong in the same one. Brayden adjusted the bow tie clumsily at his collar as he stepped out of the ballroom's side corridor. He'd needed a moment to breathe. The last hour had felt like walking through a dream made of glass, beautiful, fragile, and so far from anything he'd ever known. But it wasn't the chandeliers or the glittering gowns that had his pulse racing. It was Sienna. Not the woman in the dress, not the poised hostess of a high society gala, but the woman who had once sat beside him on a weather-worn bench and listened like what he said mattered. He spotted her again across the room, now speaking with a man in a tailored gray suit. She didn't glance toward Brayden, but her posture shifted subtly as if she sensed him. She finished the conversation, touched the man's arm lightly in farewell, then made her way toward him. "Everything all right?" she asked once she was close enough to drop the formal tone she'd worn all night. "I just needed a little air," he said, his voice low. "This place, it's a lot." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Do you regret coming?" "No," he said honestly, "but I don't know how to fit here." "You don't have to fit," she said. "You just have to be." He gave a half laugh. "You always talk in riddles. Only when I'm terrified someone's about to walk away." He blinked at her. "You, terrified?" She gave a small, uneven nod. "What you don't know is that I've hosted this event for 6 years. And I've never invited someone just because I wanted them here." He studied her face for a moment. "Why now?" "Because I don't want to keep living in rooms full of people who only see what I can offer them, and because I've been trying to work up the courage to tell you something." He waited. She hesitated, then said, "I keep thinking about Mia, how she looks at you like the world is safe because you're holding her hand. That kind of love, it doesn't come from just showing up. It comes from staying even when everything's falling apart." His throat tightened. "That's just being a parent." "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's being you." A pause stretched between them, filled only by the soft strains of the live quartet. He cleared his throat. "There's something I haven't told you either." She raised an eyebrow. "I've been offered a promotion. Supervising logistics. It's not huge, but it's stable, and it's enough to finally get us out of that apartment. I haven't signed it yet." "Why not?" "Because it means longer hours. I'd have to put Mia in after school care, less time with her. It's a trade-off." Sienna glanced toward the corner of the ballroom, where Mia sat cross-legged on a velvet bench, deep in conversation with a girl her age, both of them sipping juice from champagne flutes. A waiter hovered nearby. "You know she's going to grow up one day," Sienna said softly. "And she'll look back and remember that her dad gave everything just to make sure she could dream." he exhaled slowly. I'm just scared of screwing it up, of dragging her into things I can't finish. You're already doing the hardest part, she said. You're showing up when it counts, he looked at her carefully. What happens when all this ends, when you go back to your world and I go back to mine? She didn't flinch. Then maybe we stop pretending they have to be separate, he frowned. You think it's that easy? No, she said. But I think it's worth trying. He looked down at her hand, then took it. When Mia's asleep at night, he said, I sit on the couch and wonder how I'm going to keep everything from slipping through my fingers. And lately, I've been wondering what it would be like to have someone sitting next to me. Someone who doesn't fix it all, but who stays. Her voice was quiet. I'd stay, he looked at her. For how long? She didn't blink. As long as you'll let me. Before he could speak again, the lights in the ballroom dimmed and the MC stepped to the stage, tapping the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Before we close, we'd like to honor someone who reminds us why we do what we do. This year's Whitmore Foundation Recognition Award goes to a man who walked into one of our partner programs not seeking charity, but opportunity. And in doing so, reminded us that resilience doesn't wear a suit, sometimes it wears work boots. Brayden froze, the spotlight shifted to the back of the room onto him. Sienna leaned in. I nominated you, months ago, before I even met you. I read about your application for family housing assistance, about how you refused to take a grant because you said someone else needed it more. He stared at her, stunned. I didn't realize it was you until the day we met, she added. But I knew from the moment you talked about her that it had to be. The MC called his name again. Mia's voice carried brightly from the back. Daddy, go. His feet moved before his brain caught up. He walked through the aisle as applause grew, the crowd rising to their feet. He stopped at the stage stairs, glanced back once. Sienna was still there, hands clasped, smiling, not the polished kind, but the real one. He took the award glass, heavy, etched with his name, and stepped to the mic. I didn't expect this, he began, voice steady. I didn't expect any of this. A few weeks ago, I was sitting on a bench in a park, wondering how I was going to make rent. Tonight, I'm standing here because someone believed in me before I believed in myself. He looked at Mia, who beamed with both hands over her mouth, and because of her, he added. Everything I do is for her. I think when you love someone that much, it makes you braver. He found Sienna again. And sometimes, if you're lucky, life puts someone unexpected in your path who reminds you that even broken things can start again. That maybe, just maybe, there's more waiting for you than survival. He stepped down to thunderous applause, the weight of the award in one hand, and something far heavier lifting off his chest. Later that night, after the ballroom emptied and the city lights reflected off the river, Brayden stood on the terrace with Sienna beside him. Mia was curled up on a lounge chair inside, wrapped in a borrowed cashmere throw, fast asleep. Brayden turned to Sienna. She's never fallen asleep anywhere but home before. She feels safe, Sienna said. He looked at her carefully. So do I. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small velvet box. Don't panic, it's not what you think. He opened it. Inside was a single brass key. I bought the building, she said. The one where you live. I'm turning it into affordable housing, but I saved 1 unit for you, no strings. He closed the box gently. I want to earn it. You already have. They stood in silence for a moment, the city stretching out before them. He slipped his hand into hers. You still scared? She leaned her head against his shoulder. Not anymore. And when the night faded into dawn, Brayden Ellis wasn't the man on the park bench anymore. He was the man who had found love in the unlikeliest place, and this time, he wasn't letting it go. 2 months later, Brayden stepped onto the rooftop garden of the newly renovated building, the one he'd once trudged into every evening with aching feet and heavy thoughts. Now the rooftop had planters full of lavender and jasmine, warm string lights overhead, and a wraparound view of the city skyline. It looked nothing like it used to. Neither did his life. A soft breeze rustled the hem of his open collar shirt as he set the final place at the long wooden table. Mia had helped him fold the napkins into uneven triangles, and the scent of grilled chicken and rosemary potatoes wafted from the kitchen below. He heard her giggling from inside, her voice rising with anticipation as she helped one of the volunteers arrange cupcakes on a tray. He looked around at the space that had once been a forgotten rooftop, now transformed into a community gathering spot. Sienna had designed it herself, said every building should have a heart, and this one had been missing one for too long. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out in a sundress the color of sunlit wheat, her hair falling freely around her shoulders. She carried a basket filled with bottles of sparkling cider and homemade lemonade. "You're just in time," he said, taking the basket from her hands. She leaned up and kissed him lightly. "Sorry I'm late. I was finishing with the tenant board downstairs. We approved funding for the literacy room." He set the basket down and took her hand. "You never stop." "I don't want to," she said. "Not when it matters this much." He pulled her closer. "You've done more than matter. You've changed everything." She looked up at him, her expression soft. "I didn't change anything you weren't already building. I just gave it space to grow." They stood like that for a moment, the distant hum of the city below them, the scent of fresh bread and grilled vegetables drifting up from the kitchen. A few of the new residents began arriving, families and neighbors, some with children darting between tables, others bringing covered dishes and wide smiles. Brayden greeted everyone with ease now, not because he felt obligated, but because he felt at home. He introduced Mia to a little boy from the 5th floor, and they ran off toward the corner where someone had set up a balloon arch and a small stereo. Sienna turned to him. "I've been thinking." "That sounds dangerous." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about what it means to build something permanent, not just a building or a program, but a life." He studied her face. "What are you saying?" "I want to do this every day, not just on rooftops or at galas or during board meetings. I want to build something real. With you. With Mia, if you'll let me." He didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting for you to say that." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is a proposal." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not quite," she said, smiling. "It's a grant for you to start a logistics training program. Here, you run it, I'll fund it." He opened the envelope and flipped through the pages. It was thorough, structured, and already approved. His throat tightened. "You did all of this. You said you wanted to earn everything," she said. "This is your chance. You decide the curriculum. You hire the trainers. We already have 3 people interested in the first class." He looked at the paperwork, then back at her. "You believe in me that much." "I always have." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached for her hand and pulled her into a kiss, one that wasn't rushed or uncertain, but slow and full of the gravity that only 2 people who had walked through fire together could understand. When they pulled apart, Mia came running up, a flower crown sliding off her head. "Daddy. Look what I made." He crouched down, adjusting the crown. "You're the most beautiful girl here." Sienna crouched beside them. "I don't know. I think you might be giving me competition." Mia giggled and grabbed both their hands. "Can we dance?" Brayden looked at Sienna, then at the small open space where a few neighbors were already swaying to the music. "We'd love to," he said. They danced until the sun dipped behind the high rises, casting the rooftop in a warm golden hue. Later, after the tables had been cleared and lanterns lit, Brayden stood beside Sienna as the first stars began to appear. "Do you know what I used to dream about?" he asked, his voice low. She leaned into him. "Tell me." "Peace. Not money, not recognition, just a quiet kind of peace. A place where I didn't have to fight every day just to breathe." She took his hand and laced her fingers through his. And now, he looked around at Mia chasing fireflies, at the neighbors laughing and eating together, at the rooftop garden that had become a sanctuary. "Now I dream about staying right here," he said. "With you." She turned toward him. "Then let's stay." A few weeks later, under a canopy of string lights strung across the same rooftop, Brayden and Sienna exchanged vows in front of neighbors, friends, and Mia, who wore a white dress and carried a basket of petals she'd insisted on scattering herself. There was no gold-plated aisle or designer orchestra, but there was music. There was laughter. There was love, uncomplicated, unpolished, and exactly what they'd both been searching for. During the reception, Mia tugged on Brayden's sleeve. "Does this mean we're all a family now?" He lifted her into his arms. "We've been a family for a long time, Bug." Sienna kissed Mia's cheek. "Now it's just official." As the night deepened and the city lights shimmered in the distance, Brayden held Sienna close, her head resting against his chest, and knew without a doubt that the life he once thought was out of reach had been waiting for him all along. And this time, he wouldn't let it go.